Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I call to order the meeting of the Manassas Park Governing Body for Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. I'm just getting over laryngitis from the pollen in the air, so if my voice fails me, I will pass off to Vice Mayor Mensing. Next, we have approval of the agenda. I believe City Attorney has an addition to the closed session citation.
We have 4 matters to discuss in closed meeting for prospective business. We have 1 to amend a contract for the comprehensive development agreement. We have 1 personnel matter and 1 discussion of the award of a public contract, all pursuant to paragraphs 5, 8, 1, and 29, respectively, of the Code of 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Please join us in a moment of silence, and Councilmember Amaya, could you lead us in the pledge?
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, there is no one signed up to make public comment, but is there anyone who is not signed up but who would still like to make public comment? Please speak directly into the microphone, state your name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, Tyler Regula, 281 Mosby Drive. I just want to come up and give some kudos out to the parking enforcement agencies that's been going around town. It's been noticeable. Tickets have been going out, streets have been getting cleaned up. So I just want to say thank you, and it's not going unnoticed.
Okay, thank you. Okay. No public hearing. Moving on, we have a proclamation. Upon the completion of the proclamation reading, there will be 2 staff recommended motions. So there'll be 2 motions. The proclamation is to proclaim June 2024 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Questioning Pride Month in the City of Manassas Park. Whereas the City of Manassas Park is a welcoming community and an exceptional place to live, learn, work, play, and raise a family. And whereas Manassas Park recognizes the importance of equality and freedom from discrimination. And whereas the nation was founded upon and is guided by a set of principles that includes that every person has been created equal, that each has rights to their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that each shall be accorded the full recognition and protection of law. And whereas the City of Manassas Park's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning community are a vital part of all fields and professions and contribute to a stronger community. And whereas the City of Manassas Park is dedicated to fostering acceptance of all of its residents and preventing discrimination and bullying based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And whereas Manassas Park is strengthened by and thrives upon the rich diversity of ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents, all of which contribute to the vibrant character of our city. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control recognizes that LGBTQ teens are at higher risk to be the victims of violence and have increased suicide rates. And whereas it is imperative that young people in the community, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers, educators, and community leaders. Now therefore, I, Jeanette Rishell, Mayor of the City of Manassas Park, Virginia, and on behalf of the Manassas Park Governing Body, hereby proclaim and recognize June 2024 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Questioning Pride Month in the City of Manassas Park, and urge residents to recognize the contributions made by members of the LGBTQ community and to actively promote the principles of equality and liberty. Our first motion is that the governing body proclaim June 2024 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Questioning Pride Month in the city as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Second motion is that the governing body authorize and direct staff to fly the Pride Month rainbow flags, which do not have identifying marks for any individual, group, or organization, and which have been donated to the city by Equality Prince William for the month of June in accordance with the city's policy for flying flags from city flagpoles.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. We have David Dooley with us this evening, and Councilmember Moore will present the proclamation.
So exciting.
Would you like to say a few words? I would. Okay, super.
Normally I try and go off the cuff and get really emotional. So this time I prepared my notes that I will speak. So thank you, Manassas Park and governing body, for continuing to be the lead example of a loving and accepting community. My name is Dave Dooley, president of Equality Prince William, a gay father, uncle, a veteran, and grandfather, and recent husband.
Congratulations.
Thank you. With over 500 plus anti-LGBTQI plus laws being introduced across the country, as well as increased hate crimes and bullying, especially to transgender and people of color communities, it is more important than ever to be visible and vocal allies to all LGBTQIA plus members. It is no longer acceptable to sit on the sidelines and say, it is not my problem. Lives are being lost, homes destroyed, and families torn apart. We just want to live, thrive, and succeed as those before us. You are the example of love and care for others. Please continue to do that good work for me. Our supporters here tonight, besides the audience here, thank you, and all those who couldn't be here. Thank you, and God bless all members of the community, no exceptions. And if you're observing Ramadan, happy Ramadan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I say a few words? Can I say just a couple?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, David, for your comments. I appreciate that. I also want to announce to the audience, we're going to have a ceremonial raising of the pride flag on June 5th. They're going to go up on the 1st of June, but we're going to have the ceremony here at City Hall June 5th at 7 o'clock p.m. So come out and be a part of that ceremony. And again, thank you, David, for your comments.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of approval of the minutes of March 5th, 2024, appointment of Mr. Allan Rawley to the Board of Directors of the Upper Occoquan Service Authority for a term to expire on March 1st, 2027, approval of an authorization for the city manager to sign the necessary contractual documents to purchase the NICE Inform system equipment from Motorola Solutions at a cost not to exceed $61,720.70 as presented and subject to final city attorney review. Approval of a proclamation recognizing Northern Virginia Family Services on its 100th anniversary in May 2024, and the local volunteers who help families in need. And approval of an authorization for the city manager to sign an agreement with Brightly Software Incorporated to prepare a full asset management plan by writing Sourcewell contract number 090320 as presented and subject to final city attorney review.
Madam Mayor,
Do we have a second? Yes.
before we go,
Yes.
item number 9B, the UOSA appointment of Allan Rawley.
Yes,
I noticed, I went to the website, you have an alternate, Allan was the alternate.
yes.
Does Allan have an alternate?
No, he will need to have one. His first meeting is not until June, so we have between now and June to recruit an alternate.
I'd like to be considered.
Okay.
Since you're the
Okay.
current, I'd like to be considered as Allan's alternate,
Okay.
if that's possible.
Yeah,
Okay,
super,
great.
okay. Thank you. Sometimes it's hard to get people to step up,
Yes.
so thank you. Okay, moving on, there is no unfinished business.
We didn't get a motion.
Huh?
We didn't
So
get a
moved.
motion.
Oh, we did not get a motion. I am so sorry, I thought we did.
I just did.
Did
So
we?
moved. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to new business. City Charter Review Committee. This was placed on the agenda per the request of Councilmember Carrera.
We're gonna table this now and move it. It's gonna be removed off the agenda. We're gonna move it to the next agenda.
I'm sorry, can you speak
It's-
directly
it's-
into your,
It's being removed from the agenda at this time due to some other issues, so it'll be placed in the future.
okay, is it tabled?
It's tabled at
Okay,
this point. Yes.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 11B, fourth quarter FY24 budget amendment for city and schools.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the governing body. This is just the final appropriations request, Q4 for FY24 for both the city and schools to provide the remaining funding requested.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the paperwork for city manager? Questions, comments? Okay, there are two staff recommended motions. The first one, that the governing body appropriate $29,479,960 to the city for fourth quarter of fiscal year 2024.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. The second staff recommended motion is that the governing body appropriate $16,918,045 to city schools for fourth quarter of fiscal year 2024.
Moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next, Manassas Park School Board FY25 approved budget. Welcome, Dr. Saunders. Yeah. Okay, welcome, Paul.
Good.
All right, never spoke from here, so this is a new perspective. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm just here to introduce Dr. Saunders and Mr. Lyon from the city schools. Before they get started, I do want to thank you all for giving us the chance to present tonight. Also, we've had an opportunity to meet with some of you this week and some of you last week and a couple in the next few days to go over questions related to the budget. I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know everyone's got a very busy schedule, so really appreciate you making the effort to meet with us. And then lastly, I wanted to thank Mr. Palco for all of the help that he's been for the last, I think all of us can agree where the schools and the city are now is in a much, much better place.
Oh, yes.
And the collaboration, the way we're working together to utilize resources, share opportunities, it's been amazing. So I really, my hat's off to Mr. Palco, because it's been fantastic, and Dr. Saunders especially for fostering the relationship and really building on it. I just want to thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. I want to thank you all for the work that you do. I think it's fantastic, and thank you for the schools being a genuine partner to the city, you know, where each one of us considers the needs and the future of the other. I mean, it's a great feeling.
It's fantastic.
It is, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Especially thanks to Dr. Saunders for being so, dedicated and realistic
Yeah.
in how she manages the future of the schools as well. So just been a tremendous partner to have.
Thank you. So good evening, members of the governing body and our community. We're here tonight to present the school board approved FY25 budget for for your review and consideration. This is actually, I think, my third budget going in, and I'm excited to share some of the information with you this evening. As you know, we launched last year. We worked through an entire strategic planning process and launched our strategic plan in October of this year. Expectations of excellence around these three pillars. And the one we've been really working a whole lot on this school year has been reimagining the school experience as we continue to recover and regain everything that we were and even better since the pandemic. This is just an overview of what we've been doing with our strategic plan. In October, we launched that strategic plan. And then since then, we've been working on action teams, and our staff have been putting together teams of people that include both students and staff members to really think about what are the key performance indicators, what are the actions that are going to take place through that strategic plan. Between April and September, we're going to actually put those key performance indicators together and start that measurement process. And then our goal is by March of about this time next year, we want to have a public-facing key performance indicator dashboard that would be very simple for all in our community to understand how we're progressing towards our goals. You know, tonight we're going to talk about dollars and cents, but this is sort of our return on investment. I can't go through the presentation without talking about the amazing staff, the amazing students, and the amazing people that work in our school system. These are just some points of pride for us as we look at our school division. I could fill up page after page after page of these. I will highlight one that I think is really exciting. We had 80 students who were identified for direct admission to George Mason University this year. It's a new partnership that we have. And about every Thursday, I go to the high school and I talk, we have senior chats. So I try to talk to every senior before they graduate. And I had the opportunity to speak to a young lady who was a recipient of one of these direct admissions. And she was so proud of herself. This was something that she never saw in her future. This was something that she was not planning for. This was something that she didn't think could come for her. And she is, we talked about what she wanted to do, and she told me she wanted to be in psychology. And then we talked a little bit more, and I said to her, you know what, I think you're a future teacher. And so I hope that she returns back to us from George Mason as a teacher in our community. But there's so much for us to be proud of in Manassas Park. As you know, I'm required, the Virginia Code requires the superintendent to present a needs-based budget to the school board, and we did that earlier this year. And so what I'll share tonight are the elements of that budget. So the FY25 budget development inputs include, we use a zero-based budget process. We have all of our stakeholders start from the beginning. The budget holders start and really build that budget all the way from beginning to end. And we had a great process this year. I really feel like we had a lot of stakeholder input and a lot of people who better understand the process around budgeting. Our total FY25 school board approved budget consists of 6 funds: the federal, operating, grants, capital, medical trust, and food services. You'll hear more about those specifically from Mr. Lyon a little bit later in the presentation. This totals $60,444,000. Each of those funds are balanced in different ways. The federal fund is balanced based upon projected grant allocations. The capital fund is balanced based upon governing body projected allocation and governing body approved fund balance carryover. The medical trust fund is balanced based upon projected state and local funding and fund balance carryover. Other grants fund is balanced based upon projected FY24 fund balance carryover. And our general operating fund is balanced using projected local funds, projected governing body allocations, and a request for partial use of the city schools reserve funds and projected state funds. As I develop a budget and work with our staff, I try to make sure that they understand where the priorities are. This year we had 3 priorities. Just because it's not on this slide doesn't mean it's not important or it isn't part of the budget. But at the end of the day, when we have to make difficult decisions, these were the 3 things that my staff understood that were important to me to begin to make sure that we were financially supporting as well as continuing through our process. So I'll talk a little bit about each one of those and what it means to us and why they are priorities. The first is literacy. If you follow anything out there in the news, in 2022, the General Assembly enacted the Virginia Literacy Act, which is a law that requires Virginia school systems to really take a specific focus on early literacy in K through 8. We are required to do very specific things under this law. One of the things is have very specific resources. There are now state-approved resources that we must adopt. There's specific professional learning for each one of our teachers, as well as different kinds of plans and interventions for our students who are struggling in the area of reading. You know, literacy is a key component to success at any level of school, and we know that the earlier we address literacy, the better students will be able to work through their academic program. We have, in this budget, there are 6 new positions: 2 reading specialists, 2 instructional coaches, 1 reading intervention assistant, and 1 ESOL teachers. These are very specific to literacy, and some of them are required under the Virginia Literacy Act. These are all designated primarily at the elementary level, at the K-5 level, to really make those interventions. You know, we take a look at our, for example, our 4th grade class of students. Our current 4th grade class would have been kindergarten students when they were in the pandemic. And so these students, when I look at them, I understand that they were incredibly impacted by not having that direct instruction for a very long period of time. And we see that today in their results. Our students at the start of 4th grade, nearly a third of our students are not reading at grade level in the 4th grade at the beginning of this year. So these ideas around really targeting literacy and targeting that direct instruction and explicit instruction in science-based reading is very important for our students. We have new core content and supplemental materials that we are required to adopt, as well as specific professional learning around the science of reading. So this is a very big part of what we have been doing over this year and will continue to do in the years to come. Salaries and compensation. I've spoken to you all before about how important it is that we are competitive with our teaching salaries so that we can maintain our teaching staff, retain them, and get the best and brightest here. So I'll start off tonight just kind of sharing with you the FY25 proposed salary information from our surrounding jurisdictions. These are points of communication that came from what we call our direct competitors. I often say that people can turn left or right on Euclid and make a different choice. So it's important for us to know where our surrounding jurisdictions are and to help us understand how do we continue to maintain that competitive edge. How do we continue to be in the game as we are interviewing teachers all over? So what you have there on one side is Manassas City Public Schools, and the bottom line is that between July 1 of 2024, or 2023 and July 1 of 2024, they will see about a 10% increase in their teacher salaries. Prince William County has a little bit more diversity in how they did their salary schedules, but between July of 2023 and July of 2024, they will see about a 8 to 9% increase in their teacher salaries. And so what I want to share with you is sort of where we are and what is in this budget so that you can understand that in comparison. On the right-hand side, you see the phase chart that you have seen a couple of years before. We're really proud of the work that we've done to move our staff to a traditional teacher scale, a step scale, and make them more competitive. We did that over several years. And have really done a whole revamp of the salary schedule in the last 3 years. This budget contains a 5% average salary increase for all employees, 2% COLA, and a 3% step. It includes new employee recruitment and relocation bonuses and continues our mentor stipends program. We know that to maintain teachers, they need mentors, and they need good mentors. Our seasoned, experienced staff members can really help our brand new teachers as they come in. The pay scales are linked there on the bottom and they're also public on our website, the proposed pay scales to kind of look at how they compare. So I'll share one last comparison for you. Now, what I can say is this is an estimate. Manassas City and Prince William County have not actually published their proposed scales, so this is our Mr. Lyon and I's best guess at what their salaries would be based on the information that they shared with us. So what the first chart shows you is what is the FY25 approved budget, school board approved budget. This is how our salaries compare. And you can see that we are in range with our surrounding jurisdictions. And when I was developing the budget, I felt this was a fair place to be. This was keeps us competitive and also helps us maintain responsibility and sustainability as we move forward. I did want to share what would it look like if we went up another percentage, right? What would 3% instead of a 2% COLA look like? And you can see the difference that it showed, that you can see between the two salary scales. And so that's just for informational purposes. The one on the left is the FY25 school board approved budget. So the last priority was the sustainability, and this is, I think, where we've worked very collaboratively over the last couple of years to understand that in order to maintain salaries, we have to think about it in the future because it's year after year and it just continues to grow. And so 3 years ago, we worked together to create the school reserve line item within the governing body's budget. That was created in FY23, and I think that shows the work that Mr. Palco and the school and the community and the governing body did together to try to work through that process. The sole purpose of this really was to provide sustainability for salaries in all of those positions, knowing that as we add these increases, we will need to continue to grow that in the future. This reserve line item has grown. We are very, we're very fiscally prudent at the end of the year with the reserves and with the surplus that we have. And in the FY25 school board approved budget requests partial use of this reserve fund in the amount of $754,727 to really address salaries and those increases in salaries. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lyon to walk through the specifics of the budget and to talk about the budget development process, and then be available for any questions after that. Mr. Lyon?
Thank you, Dr. Saunders. Good evening, Mayor Rishell, honorable members of the governing board. Thank you for having us here this evening. First, I'd like to speak about our development process. It's a 5-phase process, which is how we've done it for the past couple of years. One thing that we did differently this year is at phase 2, we had our department heads, executive directors, take all of their requests from phase 1, which were the budget holders, and that started back in October. The budget holders started in October looking at their needs, identifying resources that they would like to request in the budget. They submitted those to their principals and department heads, and then those phase 1 budget requests were presented in phase 2 to the executive directors. At phase 2, the executive directors took their respective pieces of the budget under their umbrella of responsibilities, and they had to balance their pieces of the budget with some apportionment of the revenue, projected revenue. So in phase 3, the executive directors presented a balanced budget to the superintendent with items that they had to remove or reduce. The superintendent looked at those items, reviewed the balanced budget, and made adjustments, put some of those probably back in, made her priorities in the budget, and then presented them to our school board in phase 4. Our school board had work sessions to review all those pieces and approved it last night. And tonight we're at phase 5 with the governing body. Before we get into the actual budget, we'd like to review some data with you. Now, for the last 10 years, as you can see by this graph, enrollment had started to increase, but around 2017, 2018, from that point forward, our student enrollment has steadily decreased each year. I have some good news. Looks like from 22 to 23, the decrease has definitely slowed. I'm anticipating with all the economic growth and projects underway here in the park that our student enrollment will begin to balance off or stop and maybe start to grow in a positive direction in the out years here. Though the enrollment has decreased steadily over the last few years, one item I'd like to point out is our special populations, which are the line graphs on this bar chart, have not decreased. If you look at students with disabilities, which is the orange, For the last over the last 2 school years, that percentage of students has increased by 2%. And those increases are in the areas of severe disability, or I shouldn't say severe, but cognitive disabilities, the disability categories that require a lot more resource and support. Looking at English learners, you can see that has steadily climbed. We're up to 42%. And those students, again, have significant instructional needs that require more resources and staff. And then finally, the students identified as economically disadvantaged. As you see on the line graph, that indicator looked like it had been declining over the last few years. That's actually due to a data processing change. Initially, parents would have to submit an application for reducing free lunch. But starting around 1920, that process changed to direct certification through the SNAP office, a data exchange. So we no longer accept applications. And actually, right at that point too, we became a system that we provide free lunches to all the students. But because of that data processing change, I believe that our economically disadvantaged students population didn't really decrease, it's just the identification changed. And now it's starting to catch up. And so we're probably going back in the direction that we really actually accurately represents the percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. This table here just shows the data behind that chart. Per student funding for years 2017 through 2023, those figures are our final figures. And as you can see, our local per pupil ratio for spending has steadily increased over the years. And one thing you'll notice in 24 and 25, which are my estimations, in 24, the sales tax did decrease from the previous year. And then we anticipate with our projected revenue from the state that will rebound up slightly in FY25. The biggest change you'll see is in the federal per pupil. The reason for that is because the federal pandemic funds have come to an end. Right? They sunset at the end of next September for us. So as those funds dry up, we're returning to a more normal per pupil spending from the federal resources. So for total, for FY25, I project to be about 16,432, and for the current year, around 15,000. This proposed budget, or this approved budget for FY25 includes 529.6 FTEs. Our class size for K3 remains 22:1, which is unchanged, and grades 4 through 12 remains unchanged, also 26:1. Looking at our revenues, about 66% of our revenue comes from the state, nearly 27% from the city, 6% from the federal, and about 0.5% from local other resources. Expenditures by fund. 88% of our expenditures are in our general fund. We have 6 funds. So following that will be the capital fund at 4%, school nutrition at 4%, our federal at 3%. Other grants is our new fund that we established this year, as we did with our winter amendment. And that fund is for grant monies that carry multiple years of performance, so we don't have to commingle them with our general fund anymore. Expenditures by function. 68% of our expenditures are directly related to classroom instruction, followed by 7% administration, attendance, and health, and maintenance at 10%, technology at 6%, transportation, and then food services. Expenditures by object. 80% of all of our expenditures are in salaries and benefits. That's the major part of the budget. Followed by materials and supplies, purchase services, capital outlay, and other charges. So now I'll break into each of our 6 funds. Our first fund here is our federal fund, which you'll notice from FY24 to FY25, there's almost nearly a $900,000 decrease in revenue, and a $900,000, the same decrease in expenditures. We have to balance the federal budget. We can't spend more than we take in with federal funds. And again, that is due to the pandemic funds coming to an end. Our general fund, and I remind you, this is 88% of our budget. When we look at FY24 to FY25, you'll see revenue changes. We project local other sources to increase maybe by 86,000. The city transfer increased by 400,000 to 13.7 million. And the Commonwealth, we project, or they provided us projected at a $3 million increase over last year. Now, a lot of that is for the salary increases they've required over the past couple of years, making that permanent. adding those into the budget. And looking at expenditures, this includes a step for all employees and a 2% COLA. The salaries increased from last year to FY25 by 2.3 million, benefits by 707,000, and you'll see right there, there's the 3 million right there, just in that extra $3 million from the state revenue. It's gone. Then contract services went up 64,000, other charges about 268,000, materials and supplies almost 900,000. Excuse me, other funds 176, for total expenditures of $53,065,087. So our expenditures exceed our projected revenue right now by $754,727, which is the request we're asking tonight from the reserve line to cover that. When we look at our non-personnel increases, a lot of those are due to inflation, the increase in those special populations in our enrollment are having increased significant needs, but also for the Virginia Literacy Act. There's our requirements that we have to provide to be in compliance with that law. This is the other grants. This is the new fund I had mentioned earlier. This just shows we are carrying over. I don't anticipate any new revenue next year for this fund, but we do have about 1.4 million carry over from the all-in tutoring funds that we received from the state that we have until FY26 to expend. This is our school nutrition fund, self-supporting fund with the federal revenue. As you see here, the federal revenue projections we're looking at has about $91,000 decrease overall, about $74,000 decrease. The expenditures here, about 2.3 million, so you'll see a shortfall of $220,000. However, that is by design. Our fund balance in the food services fund here is too high, and the federal government is requiring us to spend that down. Our capital budget, which was part of the CIP plan we proposed here a while back, matches that plan right up. We anticipate having the $720,000 carryover at the end of next year, which supports the projects in the following year. Medical trust, which supports several employees from years back that were grandfathered into a program that offers, we pay for the difference between what their retirement subsidy and the medical premium costs. All together, all the funds together, we're looking at about $58.1 million in revenue, $60.4 million in expenditures, which gives you a deficit of $2.2 million, but with all the fund balances rolled up, that leaves the fund balance altogether about almost $1.4 million. I have provided you a hard copy of a 5-year forecast. As Dr. Saunders mentioned, we work hard with the governing body and the city manager for sustainability. Part of that sustainability is planning ahead, and this is something we've been doing with the city manager for the last couple of years in our 5-year forecast to give him some figures as he does his projections. So as you look at the federal fund on page 1, as I mentioned earlier, we can't carry a fund balance there. So looking at the revenue projections in the out years, I rolled those up about 2% each year. I rolled all the personnel and non-personnel costs, I believe I rolled those up by 2%. So you see a deficit there in the bottom. That's just there to give you, indication that we may have to cover some of those shortfalls if the federal grant doesn't cover all of them, but we'll determine that once we get there. The general operating fund is the big one. That's 88% of our expenditures. As you see in FY25, you'll see that $754,000 variance that we talked about earlier. And as you look into the out years, this model is built on every other year a step, and then the other year a step and a COLA. Now the challenge is we've never been able to follow the model that we wanted to, that we designed because of, I call it environmental factors. This year, the governor required a 2% increase in mid-year. We didn't budget for that. We certainly didn't plan for that in our 5-year forecast last year. So those type of items throw off the model. But this is our intention going forward. So as you look out in the out years in the general operating fund, you'll see that $754,000 just carries forward with the other shortfalls and just compounds as you go forward. So that's just something the governing body and the next city manager need to think about, and we need to think about as we go into the out years. The other grants is the new fund I've mentioned before. As I said, I don't project any new revenues at this point in time, but the carryover will be there from the all-in funding. On page 2, the food service fund, you'll see some deficit there. Now, in FY, I apologize, the headers didn't carry over on the backside, but if you go to the third column, FY 26, we will need to talk about, our board will need to discuss whether we start charging for meals again. Because at that point, you'll see, the fund balance will be down to where we won't be a fund balance to cover the shortfall anymore. So we'll have to decide if we start charging for meals or we build in the budget more funds, local funds, to cover that shortfall. The medical trust is self-supporting, and again, at the bottom you'll see all the all funds total. That brings me to the next steps, which is tonight. At this point, that concludes the presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Excellent presentation. Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Well, first of all, thank you all for talking with me last Friday and answering my barrage of questions. So I won't ask those same questions again, but for the folks that are sitting here, it was everything from sustainability of the spending to understanding the literacy rates. But my question tonight is more about, I understand the concept of the example of the science of reading, but could you give me an example of that?
Sure. So, I was actually an English teacher before I did all this stuff. And so, over the years, we have been teaching teachers different ways to teach reading. And anything from you might remember some of these things, right? Like whole language, to balanced literacy, to a variety of other kinds of ways, phonics. And so what has happened over the years is there have been a lot of different studies and research around really what does happen in the brain when children learn how to read. And there's a lot of scientific evidence now that it's, you can look it up, it's called Scarborough's rope. And so it basically talks about how students have to have explicit instruction in phonics and some other pieces of language in order for them to develop the brain capacity to continue with reading. So it's a science-based reading process, and it's a little bit new for teachers. And it's new for them to understand. For me, it's not, right? Sometimes some of those theories are returning, but we have just more evidence now for us to be able to understand what's the science of reading is. So it's really that taking those elements of evidence-based research and applying them to teaching and learning so that students can grasp the concept and carry that forward to access academic language.
So like last year you taught me, first we were taught to read and then we read to learn.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
You have to have those skills, and the brain has to develop in a certain way in order for kids to be able to access that content knowledge.
Okay, thank you. That helps me kind of make it more real.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Carrera, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
You've done a great job, your staff, your team, and the school board did a great job presenting since I've been back on city council. I just have one question I forgot to ask you, and I appreciate the meeting last week. So FY25 meals, breakfast, and lunch will be covered for the whole year, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
For all students, breakfast and lunch will be free to all students next year.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a question? Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I want to thank you. I met with you guys the other day, and I had an opportunity to ask most of my questions. I just had one. I know that recruitment has been terrible all over the place. Can you give us an idea of how many positions you were unable to fill this past year?
So I can tell you we filled positions randomly throughout the year, right? So I couldn't give you an exact number of what has gone unfilled. I will tell you our greatest challenge right now is our ESOL positions. We have currently, I believe, 5 vacancies that we've been carrying all year. We had to add 2 teachers based on the numbers of students that we need to serve, and we have not been able to fill those. And then we're adding 1 in this budget based on the number of students that we are that we're required to serve. And so that is our greatest challenge at the moment. We have, I think the second area I would say would be our career and technical education classrooms at the high school level, finding people coming out of industry and coming to work with young people. You have to have a passion to do that, and so that's a little bit more challenging, and sometimes those industries pay quite a bit more than the teaching world. So those would be the two highest ones. We did have a better recruitment season last year. Actually, I have a whole group of people recruiting tonight or today in several different places, so we're hopeful that we can do some early offers and get people on board as quickly as possible. That is the best way for us to do that, but we are all competing, and that's the reality.
Okay, thank you. And just thank you for your transparency, both of you. And as we said earlier, sometimes it's hard to get people to step up to volunteer. So I just want to thank Mr. Alexander for your dedication to the school board.
Yes.
I would also put a shout out for, we do have an opportunity, if there's anyone in the community who has a bachelor's degree and is interested in transitioning into teaching and wants to come and serve in that capacity, definitely reach out to us. We have a couple of new avenues to certify teachers who have bachelor's degrees or individuals who have a bachelor's degree in another field, not necessarily education, but if you're looking for the joy of working with young people, give us a call.
Thank you, Dr. Saunders and Mr. Lyons for your, I almost give you a PhD, for your presentation. I know,
Honorary.
right?
It's honorary.
Without the work. Excellent presentation. Fantastic. Doing a tremendous job, and just excited about the budget going forward. I had a couple questions, though, and that is the capital budget. I see you're going to spend $2.5 million in FY25. Can you just give us an examples of some of the things that you're going to be spending on capital?
Yeah, in FY25, we have a roof replacement at the middle school.
Roof at the middle school.
Yes, and actually we're actually started on it. We have a architectural design phase going on right now, and that'll be that's a $2 million project. So that's $2 million, that 2.5 right there.
If I can chime in on that,
Sure.
actually, in the middle school is where last year we were having the mold issues.
Right.
related to the leak
Right, I
problems
remember
in the
that.
building. So
Yeah.
the remediation was pretty expensive as well, so this was a desperate need for a new roof.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, Paul. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's good to hear.
And then we have several other smaller projects to make up that difference.
Okay. The legislative mandate for literacy that the legislation has done to us, was this an unfunded mandate? Did they give us any money to help us fill these 6 positions, or is that another unfunded mandate coming from Richmond?
So I would say both. Let's go with that.
Let's go.
We did receive some additional funds to support providing literacy training and providing some of the resources and for the reading specialists. But those are based on the minimum amounts. They don't always cover the cost of a full teacher to do those kinds of things. So there has been some funding associated to it. I know the General Assembly isn't finished, or the work at the budget level isn't finished at the state. So we could see some additional funding for those things. There has been a lot of talk about that at the state levels. I would expect if we do receive additional funding for it, it will be very targeted funding that has to be used in certain ways. So I would say yes, we're getting some, but not all of it.
Yeah, always the case. Wah, wah. The $700,000 that you're asking from the reserve, what is the balance in the reserve account? Or maybe that's a Laszlo question.
Yeah, I'll get back to you when I brief the budget on April 9th, but it's well over $1 million, so we have
Plenty of room.
the funding to do that. And going back to the state mandates, really the
Yes.
biggest one, at least that I've seen from my perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, are the pay increases, because the state will do it just for SOQ funded positions, but the amount of positions that are SOQ funded are not enough really to manage any school
do it.
system. And we want to be fair to all of our teachers. We're not just going to give pay raises to those teachers that are SOQ funded. So that's the big unfunded mandate that falls on all school systems.
Yeah. And I do really appreciate you telling us how much 1% COLA costs. I think it's $375,000 that this council can consider in our deliberations as we look at our budget. Because I think it's important that we stay competitive with our surrounding schools. And if we're starting to drop behind, we're not going to be able to recruit and do the things that we need to do. So that's important. I appreciate you giving us that information to consider. My final question is, we as a council are moving forward with a green plan for our city. Just want to know what the school district is looking at as far as green initiatives, green buses, alternate fuel buses and things of that nature to help with greenhouse gases and things of that nature. Just if you could chime in on that for us.
Yeah,
please.
so I think one of the things that City Manager Palco and I have been talking about for about a year has been the asset management piece, and I heard some language about that this evening. So first for us, around the electric bus conversation is really facility and how can we outfit the infrastructure for something like that to take place. Right now, where our buses are housed. And that is a very small space there and would need a whole set of revisions in order to do anything for electric bus work. So I think for us, that's where our conversation has been at this point, is talking about how do we look at that facility and potentially upgrade or change or do something different so that we could outfit or potentially start to explore the option of some electric buses.
And if the council would like, we can certainly add a school-oriented focus in our green plan, working with the schools if they're open to that as well to help. Since we're going to be doing a lot more shared asset management planning as well for facilities, it makes sense to include them in our green plan as well.
I think that's excellent.
idea.
I think that's absolutely exciting. So, yeah. Again, thank you, Dr. Saunders.
Do you have a
David,
fol-
thank
do
you.
you have a
No, I'm finished.
follow-up?
No.
Okay. Councilmember
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the presentation. I think I have a question for Mr. Lyons. So I guess, I don't know, you kind of explained the deficit part. So it's basically your revenue, your expenses are more than the revenue that's coming in. The reason for that, I don't know if you explained it, I apologize, I might have spaced out. but-
Oh, no, well, I start going into a rhythm. I put people to sleep most of the time. The reason for that is really when you look at the expenses from FY24 to FY25, you'll see the biggest change right there is the $3 million in salaries and benefits. That's the increases, the steps, the COLAs. So when you compare July to July, from last July to this coming July, our salaries will have gone up 7%. That's at $2.3 million. And the benefits, proportionally go up. So right away, when you look at the additional revenue from the state of that $3 million, it's gone. Then we have all the, our enrollment in those subgroups with significant needs. They're increasing, the Virginia Literacy Act, and then inflation on top of all that.
Right.
The non-personnel costs went up too. And that's really, all of those together impact that bottom line, and that's why the expenses exceed the projected revenue at this point.
And so for the budget, I guess the city ask is to cover that deficit? Right?
Correct. The last 2 years, we've transferred back because one thing I'm a big believer in is I don't spend money to spend money.
Right.
And the last couple of years, as we've taken on these positions, we've cut off spending in the spring only for essential things can purchases be made.
Right.
And at the end of FY22, I believe my transfer back was about 1.1 million, and this current last year for FY23 is 1.2 million back to the city. So we've been very frugal and trying to support like Mayor Rishell said, your priorities and your goals. We're definitely trying to support everyone's goals on both sides of the programs.
And that's, if you can, for Dr. Moore, Councilmember Moore, I said Dr.
PhD.
So his request for the reserve, is there the reserve for the past 3 years?
Yeah, so
Can
for
you
the
just-
past few years,
What
we
the
created,
carryover was?
what we created was a revenue stabilization fund, right? Because we can't predict future state revenues and future state mandates. So it was prudent to kind of build, in general, a city fund balance for this very purpose. There's multiple reasons for it, but we break down our reserves by specific goals, right? Whether it's cash on hand, so we don't have to go back to the days of borrowing from banks for accounts payable and payroll, right? Rainy day funds, if there's a recession, we don't have to you don't want to cut spending when there's a recession. You want to help stimulate the economy, right? we have different reserve targets, asset management funds, right, which are going to be educated by the agenda item you guys approved earlier tonight in consent, and then schools as well. That can have the biggest wave depending on how much the state decides to fund. And us, more than other jurisdictions in Northern Virginia, because of our weaker tax base, we're more dependent on state funding than the other jurisdictions. And that has the biggest kind of ebb and flow. So having this reserve revenue stabilization fund is critical, and for the city to continue to build that as well once we rebound and think about covering. So just to give a little bit more context, the schools the last few years have done an amazing job where they've really, from a budget standpoint, they've kind of frozen all these other charges besides salary and benefits from a budgeting standpoint, even during inflation, which was incredible. And really all their increases were related to salaries to stay competitive with the rest of the region, which is what we're trying to do collectively. That they did that to help the city, right? We finally stabilized in FY23, and they gave us the breathing room to finally be able to do something with those savings and reduce the tax rates like our residents wanted, and cover some, the pay raises for our employees that we did in FY23. So the schools helped the city out tremendously, but that wasn't sustainable in the long run because there is inflation. That's been impacting every organization, every private sector entity, government as well. We're getting hit hard with inflation for these other non-salary items, but then we're also competing with the other jurisdictions for salary increases, which are the most expensive component. And so we have a challenge in the long run, both city and schools, and how are we going to fund competitive pay for our teachers and our city employees? How are we going to fund growing capital costs because of inflation? That's where inflation has hit us the hardest. How are we going to fund those in the long term with our existing tax base and then uncertain state revenues going forward as well? That's why it's critical to have that strong, robust fund balance. So even if you're caught off guard one year, you don't have to stress. You're still in a good. You don't have to increase the tax rate that year. You can tap into that fund balance to address it and then pivot, right? And there's other things that, again, I've been a proponent of hopefully adding Manassas Park if it doesn't pass for all jurisdictions for that's sales tax as well. That's critical for resolving this in the long run. And that reduces the impact on the real estate tax rate for our residents. And sales tax is paid from a combination of our residents and non-residents who come and shop in our city. That's the better type of tax to help alleviate pressure on our residents. And that's a critical piece, I think, for long-term capital funding that we're going to have for the schools as we hope to improve capabilities in the high school in terms of CTE programming for our kids, and more importantly, also, not more importantly, but equally consequentially, renovations for high school, middle school, and both elementary schools that are coming now, and also more so in the future in the 30s and 40s, that our asset management plan, which you guys approved tonight to be able to do, is going to help highlight kind of all the next 30, 40 years financial impacts from our schools, our police station, our fire station, our rec center, this building, the future public works building. When we figure out what to do with that, it's going to lay out all those costs so we know what to expect and what kind of debt capacity we're going to need to be able to address that, so we don't make the mistakes we did in the 2000s to keep everything sustainable. So that's the challenge we have to talk about, right, is how do we keep a strong tax base or grow our tax base, and then how do we maintain a strong fund balance so that if state funding does get reduced for schools, the city can make up for that without needing to raise tax rates. And I think we've gotten ourselves in a good position to be able to do that.
No, thank you for that. But will you be able to provide the last 3 years of what the balance?
Oh, yeah. I'll present that in my budget.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then is it like, how the city takes a certain percentage of their income and goes to the general fund? Is that what the schools, are you guys budgeting for the reserve, a certain percentage? Or
No.
is it
So-
just left over?
No, we budget right down to the penny.
Yeah.
We don't even have a contingency in our budget. I mean,
Right.
we budget right. But what we do is, we, right now, and I do this every year, we cut off spending.
Mhm.
And it's only essential items that we need. We do not have a spend down frenzy. What isn't spent now doesn't get spent unless there's a justification for it. And that's what we've done each of these years, which has allowed us to have. But also, we haven't filled positions. That's a big part of that.
Right.
We've had a lot of positions go unfilled, and that's a huge part of that balance. One fact I like to add that allowed us, that supported us to do the things we've been able to do with the budget-wise, is City Manager Palco's support with and in your support too, is funding our capital budget separately from our general fund. In the previous to our existence here, it was all in the general fund.
Right.
And that made it hard. With city manager's support and all of your support, we were able to fund that separately, which enabled us to really to do the things we needed to do with our general fund.
It also builds transparency for future financial impacts to the city and future debt capacity.
Absolutely. And I guess my concern moving beyond FY25 is that the free meals, I think that's something that we need to consider moving onward past 25. If there's not a budget for it, we should plan for it. If there's not funds for it, we should plan for it.
Yeah, I project FY27, we'll definitely have to plan. We'll have to take a deep look into that and may have to include it somehow in our budget.
Okay. And I think previously, my last point, you guys provided like a 5-year plan for your capital projects of what's coming up.
Yes.
Is that something?
We're going to brief that on, I want to say Tony, is it the 3rd or 4th week of April that we brief the CIP to the governing body?
Okay, so it'll be presented later.
I think it's the 3rd week,
Okay.
but we'll be back with, we won't present every project, but I'll give a summary, and what you guys will have in your packet every single
That's
project.
fine. No, I don't want
So you can
every
ask
project.
us any questions. The
Yeah.
schools will be there that night, police, everyone will be there, so you can ask us any questions on it. But I'll give a summary of what's going on with the CIP.
Okay, yeah, just a list of what's coming up.
I do apologize, because earlier I said I presented it already. I presented it to the planning commission, not the board, I'm sorry.
I think that's it. Thank you for everything and great.
Thank you.
Good job. Yeah.
No follow-up?
No,
Okay.
nothing, we're good.
Last call for comments and questions. Yes, ma'am.
So this just popped in my mind. Are there any initiatives from the state and federal level, potential actual that you're hearing about that's gonna pop up and kind of impact the budget and your ability to
Yeah.
serve?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we hear most about is additional salary increases for teachers. That's a conversation in the General Assembly from the governor. Just like we got this year, a required 2% change in salary on the scale in January that we weren't planning for. I think we could anticipate that there might be some additional requirements around salaries for staff members. May come with some additional funding as well, but I don't know that for sure. That would be one thing. As well as any additional requirements around the Virginia Literacy Act, particularly that with professional development and hours required for certain professional development for some of those teachers, really our K-8 teachers. I think those are some of the things that have been discussed, but they don't finish their work until June 30th at 11:59.
Yeah, well, you got they got a half a second or a half a minute. So, as long as you can by the deadline. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Last call. Thank you so much. That was
Just real quick.
wonderful. Yes.
Vice Mayor Mency asked about recruiting, and I was going to ask Dr. Saunders. At a couple of meetings ago, we talked about the numbers we're trying to fill, but one of the things the school did an amazing job, and I just want to tout it because they were so good at it, was the diversity this year is so much better. So I'm going to ask her if she can provide that data to you guys so you can see the difference in this class of teachers that's come in. It's amazing. You'd be shocked at the numbers, but we're really, really happy with seeing that. So just wanted to tie that off with you. Also, start thinking about it. I was going to mention the free and reduced lunches, but also CTE. The community, there's tons of kids in our community that just go into the workforce, and we really want to start them off on their best foot. So one of the things that the board is heavily focusing on right now is CTE. So over the next year, we'll be coming back to you to kind of ask your opinion, see where you stand. But we just want to kind of plant those seeds with you guys now so you can think about it and we can kind of regroup and come up with priorities. And thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for everything that you folks do, truly. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our second public comment time. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, sorry, will this gentleman go? Have this gentleman that wants to speak?
Oh, yes.
Good evening, and thank everyone who make the city of Manassas Park a nice and safe place to live in. But tonight I have basically, I've been compelled to point the way the new no commercial vehicles ordinance on the city streets of Manassas Park. And the reason being is that I've been issued a ticket a couple of days ago. And then I parked within 20 feet of a crosswalk. I was 19 feet from the crosswalk. And in the same street, and actually a few cars from me, there was a truck, a commercial truck, big truck with a two-wheeler truck. And I called the police department a few times already to enforce the parking new ordinance, and they kind of argue with me whether the vehicles are commercial or not, whether it's 10 minutes away from being the time to enforce the law, or whether they gonna send someone but never shows up. And there is cars or trucks where they have a truck license plates, and clearly that's a commercial vehicle. And one time that I talked to a person who answers the calls on the police department, asked me the question, what makes me think that was a commercial vehicle? So to this day, there is still many commercial vehicles being parked in the same street, and vehicles that just being set there for not days, weeks, but months on the same spot. And one issue that we have, which I saw a nice thing that the city of Manassas Park did on the new renewed street by the school, Osborne School, is that they mark the parking spaces, which is a really nice thing to do, because sometimes people just try to get a space for 2 or 3 cars, not allowing everybody to like get a better or a much wider space for others to park. So now I used to have a small business, which I owned one commercial vehicle, but now that everybody's looking for a parking in any place is like not less than 300, because everybody's crowding all these places where we can park our cars. And the place, the condominium where I live, they have, I guess, rule that they don't issue permits for anyone to park also commercial vehicles. So we don't make enough money, but I don't really want to sell my car, because I'm thinking to go back into the business. We kind of have to close our business because of COVID.
Excuse me. So it's been 3 minutes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But before,
Can you comment?
yeah, so a couple things. Number one, can we get your name and address per the city clerk?
Sure. My name is Ismail.
And your address?
Do I have to?
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to have it for the record.
I live on La Paz.
Okay.
And then second, sorry if you've had a difficult time with customer service with police. We have our police chief here. You can connect with him after. We'll make sure to go address the issues that you're talking about.
I mean,
on the
it's
street.
a bigger
Yeah.
thing than just that, because basically I'm arguing, and I'm really displeased with the way the police handles every time I call for the police, because I don't know, it's a really like long story to say, but I have front cameras where they can tell the whole story, how the way the police handle at times, how they address to the residents of the city. And I believe sometimes I feel even harassed. I mean, I do my duties. I call, and if I get my ticket issued within the reasonable because it's my mistake, I understand, but sometimes it's just, you know, nonsense to be arguing with someone who clearly has the reason to be in.
So again, we've exceeded the 3 minutes, but please get with the police chief, and maybe chief, you and I can meet. We'll schedule a meeting, we'll sit down and we'll hear your concerns. If you have other neighbors who have the same concern, I'd like to hear more about it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? Yes, sir. Please come to the microphone, state your name and address, speak directly into the microphone, and limit yourself to 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Alban Kurtishi. I live at 9217 Andrew Drive, and I have about like 3 questions for the Manassas Park City Schools. I'm a student of Manassas Park High School, and the first question is, why were there gates put on the bathrooms? I just want to know why that was.
Do you want to maybe do all your questions? We can note them down, and then we can
Yeah.
certainly get back to you if we can't answer them tonight.
Yeah, of course. And my second question, is there any chance there could be metal detectors put at the door? Because I knew there was, I don't know why, for a couple weeks there was like another doorway entrance to the school. I thought maybe that was metal detectors, but it clear wasn't. And the third question, is there anything being done about this is probably the worst problem of the school, about how many people that are vaping in the bathrooms? I understand that you guys made a whole presentation about asking for more money about fixing the schools, but there's going to be nothing to fix if there's no students.
I can at least address the metal detectors if you guys would like. So,
I just had a question of you. Did you go to the school board and present your concerns to our school board?
No, I just randomly decided to come here.
Okay,
one
well, I
day.
appreciate that coming here tonight, but I would also suggest that we have a school board that meets here in this building on a regular basis, that you would present those to them as well. But sure, Laszlo, you're.
absolutely. So appreciate you coming out as well and engaging with us and asking us these questions. The only one I can answer directly, again, I'll leave everything else to the superintendent, is the metal detectors, because the city just did a project for about $3 million to enhance the security for all schools. So the temporary doorway you saw, that was a temporary thing that we ended up modifying to make sure it fit, the fire marshal's recommendations. But what we did is we enhanced the glass and the walls and doors with ballistics to make it harder for active shooters to gain access. We installed security lock systems on every door, so automatic locking can occur. That was one of the issues with the Uvalde shooting. That didn't happen. And security cameras with IP capacity so that our police can tap in and see and identify where shooters are, where victims are, have a better perspective of what's happening in there. I know Prince William County has started implementing some of those metal detectors as well. Those are very expensive. That could be the next step we could evaluate in terms of security, but we've already invested about $3 million in those ballistic enhancements. We haven't had a discussion yet of metal detectors, but I know that's under review with Prince William County to see how effective those are. I'd probably want to wait for a little bit more data on that before I'd make the recommendation here to the governing body, and also hear more from our police department as well. But our police and schools are constantly coordinating to evaluate security issues, and I'm sure they'll get back to you on some of these other questions as well that you have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure Dr. Saunders has already taken note of your concerns, and they'll be ready for you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? Okay, seeing no. Yes, ma'am.
So a couple things. This coming Saturday, we may have the stream cleanup where we have to decide, because it's supposed to be raining again and quite a large amount of rain and cold. So Sarah, there'll be an email coming your way soon, because I think we need to check with the fire department to see at what point, like, it's too dangerous to be in the water with the temperature. And the other thing we have planned for the third time on on Saturday, March 30th, over at Brandy Station. So fingers crossed that we will not have rain on the 30th. But if we do, then we have another makeup day for it.
Okay.
So just please, everybody, just check the Facebook page, or just reach out to Yessie and I will give the information.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to city manager's report.
Yeah, I just want to thank the governing body for approving the asset management program tonight in the consent agenda. That's something I've been talking about since 2017, and we've finally gotten to the point financially where we're ready for that. We finally have the general services team built up to manage that program, but that's going to be, I feel more comfortable knowing that that's going to be done, and you guys are going to have full transparency in terms of long-term capital liabilities and how to make sure we have a financial plan to get that addressed. It's absolutely, that is the longest term kind of, besides I think salary increases, which are going to be an ongoing challenge as we compete with other jurisdictions. Your long-term capital liabilities are going to be a massive challenge, especially when I see numbers coming out of other jurisdictions. It's pretty frightening with how expensive facility projects have become. So getting ahead of it, understanding your long-term 30, 40-year financial impacts with your facilities and coming up with a game plan, I think is just going to set the city up for a much more financial sustainable position than what we inherited a few years ago.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, moving on to closed session. Dean, would you please read us into closed session?
Sure. I recommend that the governing body go into closed meeting for the following reasons. 1, to discuss the assignment, appointment, performance, and salaries of 2 city employees. 2, to discuss 4 separate prospective businesses and industries where no previous announcement has been made of the businesses and industries' interest in locating in the city. 3, to discuss the award of a contract involving the expenditure of public funds where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the city. And 4, to discuss the amendment of the comprehensive development agreement between the city and the Village at Manassas Park, LLC, where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the city pursuant to paragraphs 1, 5, and 29, respectively, of subsection 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. We're going into closed session. 5-minute break.